welcome to the 2016 Range Rover Sport, a car that offers all things, arguably. Is this the only car you ever need to own? Let's think about that for a second. It's practical, it's capable off-road, and as the Sport in its name suggests, is very capable on-road. Under the bonnet you have a twin-turbocharged 4.4 litre V8 diesel engine churning out 335 brake horsepower and 516 pounds-feet of torque. 0 to 62 miles per hour takes just 6.5 seconds, which is pretty quick considering this car weighs 2.5 tonnes, and it will go on to a top speed of 140 miles per hour. This specific Range Rover Sport in its Autobiography specification has really hit the nail on the head. It looks quite sinister in its dark blue paint with the black pack on top of that. I'm not a fan of all the bling bling bright work you see on a lot of Range Rovers these days driven by footballers, but I have to say this one is slightly more reserved, but it has something slightly evil in its character, I suppose, and I really like that. Now, as I mentioned, this is the Autobiography, which is the creme de la creme of the specifications. It has everything, and on top of all the standard stuff which comes with Autobiography, which is about a list longer than my arm, it has plenty of options added on top, taking its £84,000 price tag all the way up to £92,000 for this specific Range Rover Sport. So what trinkets do you get for your money? Well, typical of Range Rover, you get a really beautifully upholstered cabin, really high quality stitching to all of the leather, high quality materials, everything you touch just feels expensive, as it should do in nearly £100,000 vehicle. These seats that you sink into have good bolstering as well. The Sport in its name would suggest that you could do with something holding on to you if you decide to drive this car a little bit exuberantly. We'll come on to that in a moment. And the seats are heated and massaging, and you've got dual zone climate control. You've also got another set of climate control in the rear of the car if they fancy a totally different temperature to what the driver and passenger feels like. This one's got a glass panoramic roof that not only lets plenty of light into the cabin, but this one also retracts, letting sunlight and fresh air into your kingdom on wheels. Moving to the back, there's good levels of headroom. Legroom's okay, but there is a long wheelbase version of this car if you want to spend more time in the back of your Range Rover. It's also optioned with two large displays, which can play all sorts of media, TV, stuff off your iPhone, etc, etc.
Rear visibility isn't the best, but there is a reversing camera.
Now, the Range Rover Sport can be optioned with 7 seats, which makes this really practical. Okay, the 2 rearmost seats are jump seats, but 7 seats nevertheless. This specific one is 5 seats, which means you can make the most of that huge boot.
784 litres is at your disposal.
Of course, taking centre stage on the dashboard is JLR's brand new touchscreen infotainment display. There are many, many more toys, but we don't have all day to list them. So what about the way it drives? How does it feel from its high, elevated, lauding driving position? Well, pretty good actually. It's one of those cars that feels quite empowering, because as you look down upon all their peasants and their Fiat Pandas and whatnot, you feel in the upper echelons of society, let's say. You've got all of the luxuries that the automotive world can throw at you, you're comfortable, the road and engine noise is brilliantly suppressed, it's very quiet in here. You could even have a whispered conversation if you wanted. And the Alcantara on the roof, it's a beautifully relaxing vehicle to drive. At higher speeds, maybe a little bit of wind noise, but I mean nothing really to write home about. There's a reason that Range Rover has the reputation it does. And of course, remembering that every Range Rover carries the Land Rover logo, this car is also very capable off-road. It's equipped with something called Terrain Response 2, which obviously has all the usual gravel, mud, snow, ice, etc. settings. This very capable all-wheel drive chassis that the car sits upon. But also, in addition to its air suspension as well, which makes it excessively versatile, you have an auto mode. So the car's actually clever enough to know via its sensors and how much traction it's losing from each wheel, it knows exactly what mode it should be in. But my goodness, when you decide to put your foot down, this car shifts so much faster than what a 2.5 tonne vehicle has any right to. I mean, you put your foot down, you use that torque really low in the rev range, and it just punches you off down the road. It is incredible the rate of knots that you can build up in this. But you've got to be careful because it's so tranquil and quiet, and other than a little bit of engine noise letting you know that you've got the throttle pinned hard, you can very quickly lose track of how fast you're going. But now we meet the paradox of fast, large SUVs, and that's the handling, because really being heavy and tall should compromise all of its dynamic handling. But Range Rover have just absolutely struck a hole in one with this car.
An aluminium architecture saves 420 kilograms in this car.
You go down here, you put it in dynamic, firms up the dampers, increases the weighting of the steering wheel, increases throttle response, and you have a car that you can actually throw around a twisty B road. It's seriously, seriously impressive. The way that it controls its body roll is really impressive for this sort of vehicle. Though the steering lacks a little bit of feel, it's quite precise. You can put it exactly where you want it on the road. Now, of course, there is the supercharged Jaguar V8 version of this car, which I am not surprised after driving this and considering its handling. That thing could probably really give some serious sports cars, I'm looking at you Porsche, a run for their money. If you decide to take over changing gear yourself, you have these two wheel-mounted paddles of this excellent 8-speed auto gearbox. JLR put this gearbox in almost everything now, and quite rightly so, because it's so responsive, but also the changes are so unnoticeable because just this absolutely seamless shifts. But whenever the fun eventually has to stop, there are some great big Brembo calipers up front to arrest proceedings. I mean, you can just have so much confidence throwing it into a corner and everything, it just sticks. It's got loads of grip. You can feel exactly what it's doing. Like I say, the body roll is reduced for this sort of car, but the little bit it does give off makes it nice and predictable as to the trajectory of the car around the corner. And torque vectoring as well pulls it straight into the apex. That's very impressive. Range Rover claim that this car will do 32 mpg combined, and is a pretty good workhorse as it will tow over 3.5 tonnes also. Yes, the Range Rover Sport isn't cheap, and the Autobiography certainly does cost a princely sum, but factor this in. The fact that it has such a broad range of abilities, from climbing the highest mountains to taking the kids to school to being an enjoyable car to throw around some country roads, maybe there is an argument that it's rather good value, as that you only ever need to own one car.
Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Please subscribe for more on the latest and greatest cars to hit the road. For all of the latest automotive news, written reviews and coverage from motor shows, go to www.insidelane.co.uk.